Here we are.
Here we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new live broadcast on Facebook and YouTube about Gate-Away, with Gate-Away and about several aspects that we've been covering through this live broadcast. Today's topic is probably one of the most scaring, or if not saying scaring, probably worrying subject or aspect when buying a property in Italy, which is taxes. And we know that a lot of people get a great confusion about taxes in Italy, how they work, and how much do we have to pay. So we know it is something that we usually get a lot of questions about. And to get all this aspect clear, we have our guest today, which is an international lawyer focused on taxes about property in Italy. And let's say we can call it our Caronte that will lead us through the hell of taxes in Italy, all the way up to heaven. I don't know, about buying a property in Italy in a more clear way. And we know that, as I said, a lot of people are worried, but after this live broadcast, and thank also to Nick, I'm sure you will consider taxes in Italy and the taxation system in Italy less complicated than probably you think about. Let me introduce our guest. As I said, Nick Mehta. He is an international lawyer. And Nick, welcome to our live broadcast, and thank you very much for being here with us. Can you tell us more about yourself and what you do?
Thank you very much, Simone. It's a true pleasure to be here today with you in this live stream. It's a very nice opportunity, and yes, I'm an international lawyer. I focus on assisting expats and people who don't live in Italy doing business in Italy, and in particular buy properties in Italy, inheritance matters, immigration, and really all the matters that might interest people who buy properties in Italy. So I also have a PhD in tax law. So everything we work on, we also focus on the tax implications that specific transaction or matter might have. And I like also to share that I was born in Italy, and I lived in Italy for about 30 years. And then about 12 years ago, I moved to the US, where I currently live. I just spent a year in Italy as a year abroad during COVID, but now back to the US, and I do back and forth every couple of months. I am in Italy, where I have most of my associates who work with me in my offices in Italy.
And we can definitely say that your accent is definitely less Italian than mine. And we can say that you actually live in the US. So
Thank you.
Oh yeah. Thank you, actually. So how is it the taxation system in Italy? So if we want to buy a house in Italy, what we have to go through about taxes and what we have to face
Sure.
Buying a property in Italy.
Sure. And as you said earlier, taxes in Italy are complicated, and many times people fall in love for a property, and they they want to jump right to it. But it is very important to know how the taxes work, because if you take a little bit of time up front to plan and structure your transaction in a better way, and if you know a little bit how it works, the tax aspect of the transaction, you can save a significant amount of money, and also can avoid the risk of potential tax violations and fines. So to answer your question, taxes in Italy on property purchase depend on several factors. For example, you might have a different taxation if you are buying a residential unit or land, or if you're buying from a private individual, or if you're buying from a company, and so forth. So there are several potential options. And if you want, we could discuss some of them. And
definitely. Let's start from the basic, and so we can go through everything. So
okay, perfect. Yeah, probably the most common situation that a private individual who wants to do an investment in Italy goes through is when it is a private individual who would like to buy a home from another private individual. So people go on a website like Gate-Away.com, find the property they like, and in most cases, these homes are owned by people, individuals, normal people, not developers, not companies. So if you are
which is, as you said, the most common situation.
Is the most common situation, I would say, yes. So if you're buying from an individual, if you are an individual, so if you are not acting as a company, you can take advantage of a very significant tax opportunity in Italy, which is to pay taxes not on the purchase price of the transaction, but actually the value that the property has on the Italian tax record. Some people refer to it as cadastral value. Okay. So the reason why it is so advantageous is because the cadastral value is much lower than the market price of a property, and in residential units this happens. So for example,
you mean if the property you are about to buy is for sale for 100,000 euros, the cadastral value can be a lot less than that. Let's say 30,000 euros, something like that.
Yes, the national average is about 30 to 40% of the market value. So the national average of cadastral value for Italian real estate for residential units is 30 to 40% of the actual market value. So yes, your example is right on the point. And a property that is advertised and sold for 100,000, most likely the taxable value is going to be 30,000.
Okay. So, and how is that? Why there is so much difference between the property value, the market value, and the cadastral value?
So there is so much difference because the property value on record doesn't get adjusted every year. In other countries, like in the US, for example, the property value on record, which is called assessment value, right? It is updated every year. Every year, usually it increases, or if you get
we are a bit slower.
Yes, in Italy, it's actually the value, the property value on record is stuck to what it was established about 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago. So obviously, if the property value increases over time, as it normally happens, the tax advantage will also increase because you will still pay the taxes based on the cadastral value, the value on record, whereas you will pay actually much more than that in reality to the seller.
Okay, there are already many questions that are going through about the cadastral value. This one is there any difference between the urban areas versus countryside, talking about the cadastral values? And another one, so we can probably, who decide about cadastral value and when?
Okay, so yes, when there is to answer the first question, yes, there is the difference between urban area versus countryside area. And in particular, actually, when a property is built, a cadastral value is assigned to the property, and the parameters are much different depending whether the property is in the countryside or in a city, for example, and also it depends what area of the city. So, however, still, in general, even for a property that is built today, the parameters that are used to calculate the value that will go on record, the cadastral value, still will give as a result a value, an amount that is lower than the actual market value. So for example, if you take two exactly same exact properties in a big city, one in a prime area, downtown, where there is all the promenade, nice shops, and another one who is in the outskirts, like much farther from the downtown of that city. Well, the parameters will give a different value. The cadastral value for the one downtown will be higher than the cadastral value of the same exactly property with the same exactly surface, which is more on the edge of the city. And the same applies for the countryside area. Rural areas values are less than the values that apply for cities. And to go to the other question that they asked,
who decide about cadastral value
yes,
and when?
Yes. So basically, when for properties that are new, when the property is ready to be recorded, when after the basic structure has been built, the builder will file the application with the local township to have the property registered with the proper zoning. So the builder builds a residential unit. Obviously, they had to file all the paperwork to prove that that property complies with the parameters to be a residential unit. And the builder will say this property is.
This is for new built homes, because if you buy
yes,
built old homes, the cadastral value is already on the register.
Yes, it was assigned, like when the cadastral values were created, it was assigned based on a blueprint of the property, a map of the property that was filed with the cadastral office. And based on that blueprint and the floor the property was on, the area of the city, as I was saying, the surface, how many bathrooms and balconies and things like that, the cadastral office, the township cadastral office, will assign a specific value, which is not arbitrary. There are actually formulas that when you enter all the information, the formula will give you the result that applies to your specific property. So it's really a mathematical formula.
Okay, it's no one's decision.
It's no one's decision. However, if you have a very old property that is completely neglected and really has a very high taxable value, but for whatever reason you think that it is not appropriate because, for example, it is, yes, in a beautiful area, yes, it is high floor, but the building is a disaster, is a ruin. It hasn't been upgraded or updated in a long time, and the ceilings are too low or some other factors. You can file an appeal to get a revision of the value of record.
Okay.
And so there is a specific procedure to bring that value down, because there are some very, very few situations where actually the cadastral value goes over the purchase price. Is more than the purchase price.
Yeah.
And the result is that when you go buy a property like that, if you don't pay the taxes on the cadastral value, which is higher than purchase price, your transaction might be audited and you might be fined for not having paid the proper taxes. So you have two options in that case. One is to get a professional expert, a surveyor, who's in Italian will be geometra or an architect or an engineer, to prepare a report and explain why that property cadastral value is not appropriate, and why and what the actual current market value is. And then with that survey, with that expert opinion certified in court, you can buy the property for the market value and tax at the market value level instead of the higher cadastral level. The other option is ask the seller to file an appeal, get the cadastral value adjusted, and then go and do the purchase.
Okay, thank you very much. And there was a question saying, actually, so should I purchase a home before the government makes changes to property taxes and cadastral categories? Because I think everybody heard that Draghi and the government said we want to update all the cadastral system about the value. But I think he said also we won't make any changes. Well, actually, that will not impact the prices, the taxes, and the cadastral value up to 5 years, something like that. If you
yes, definitely. Yes, somebody said yes. We need to hurry up because they're going to increase the cadastral value, so we might end up paying higher taxes. Yes, hurry up, because in 5 years, this perhaps might be reality. So it is important to say that they've been discussing increasing the cadastral value for many years now. at least 10 years I've read about it. Now they seem more determined to do it and make it happen. The government has committed to do the transition without increasing the taxes. However, I don't know if that is going to be possible at the end of the day. They are saying that what they're going to do is increase the taxable basis, but lower the transfer taxes. For example, in the US, you pay transfer taxes based on the purchase price, but you pay 2% usually, and it is split between buyer and seller. So when you have to pay 1%, it's not that bad. But when, like in Italy, you have to pay 9%, it is a significant difference. It's a significant difference.
So they will rise the cadastral value, but they will lower the percentage on taxes.
That is one of the things that they are saying. Yes. For example, one of the things they did recently for the annual property taxes, the IMU, right? IMU. What they did a few years ago, they said, well, the cadastral value is really too low. So we're going to change the multiplier. So the multiplier from being 126, so they used to multiply the cadastral value times 126. Now it is time 160 and something. So obviously, they said, okay, the cadastral value will stay the same, but we are increasing the parameters to calculate the taxes. So that is something that they might be doing always, and adjust either or the
work on different parameters to
yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's go back on so now that we actually made clear what's the difference between the cadastral value and the real market value of the property. So I want to buy a house. I'm a private seller. I'm a private buyer, and I buy it from a private seller. And let me clarify one thing. Usually in this transaction, there is the estate agents in between, which is of course a company. So if you buy a house through an estate agent, it's still between privates. It's still a private transaction, isn't it, Nick? So
correct.
It doesn't mean that there is, since the estate agent is a company, you buy from a company. No.
Absolutely. The estate agent will will not affect the taxation on the buyer. It is it is a separate transaction that you do with the real estate agent. But when you buy as a private individual from a private individual, that is the majority of the cases. And so in these type of cases, you have two options. You can buy the home if it is a residential unit. Once again, it needs to be zoned as a residential unit. You can opt for either buy as a holiday home, so a home that will not be used as your primary residency, and it will not be in the commune, in the city where you decide to move. And in that case, you will pay 9% transfer taxes on the cadastral value. Okay. If you, however, intend to move to the city where that property is located, not necessarily into that property, but into the city where the property is located, within 18 months after the purchase, you can apply for the so-called first home tax reduction. Instead of 9%, you will pay 2%. And also the taxable basis will go down. You remember earlier I said that the parameter to calculate the value is the multiplier is 126 for holiday home, is 115.5% for a first home.
So and also changes the parameter.
Also the taxable basis also goes down about 10% almost. So that's pretty significant. Now, you remember when I said first home? I wanted to clarify something very important, Simone, because many people make this mistake. First home doesn't mean that if you have a home in Italy, you cannot benefit from the first home tax reduction. Because you can have a home in Tuscany and at a certain point decide to buy a home in Umbria. If you have a holiday home in Tuscany, you can buy a first home in Umbria. The important thing for a first home to qualify as such for tax purposes and pay less taxes is that you have to commit to move there, to move to the township, to the town, the village where that home is within 18 months after the purchase. Or you have to be already a registered resident of that village at the time of the purchase. Even if you are no longer a resident of the village after, 2 weeks after the purchase, let's say, it will still be good. It will still qualify to get the first home tax reduction at completion. The law does not require for you to keep your residency in that home or in that village. Is that clear so far?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, if people have questions, they can keep, since there's a lot of questions coming.
Yes.
So there is much difference between paying taxes when you buy a house as a primary home or as a second or a holiday home. You pay a lot more taxes on a second home. And
yes.
What if let's say I'm American, I own a house in America and I buy a house in Italy. Of course, my house in America, in the US, is my primary home. Can be also the Italian home be primary if I live there, or if I change. Is it something possible?
Yeah, that is actually a very good question, because there are many times I talk about this with my clients, my American clients, and also from other places in the world, really. But it is absolutely possible to have two primary homes, let's say. Like, even if you, for example, the typical example is for people who have dual citizenship or who are Italian citizens who live overseas. So if you have Italian passport, Italian citizenship, and you live overseas, and you don't own in Italy any property whatsoever, you actually can access a very special tax incentive that very few people know about, or not everyone knows about, I would say, which is, if you are an Italian citizen living overseas, you can buy the first property in Italy with the 2% lower taxation without having to commit to move to Italy, and without having to be in Italy, obviously, because you are overseas. That is a special incentive that is offered by the Italian government as a way to help Italian citizens who live overseas to establish a stronger connection to Italy. So it's like a way to say, okay, you're an Italian citizen overseas. We want you to, to stay connected to Italy. So the first home that you buy in Italy, it will be at a discounted taxes if you want to. And for this specific incentive, it counts if you already have a home in Italy or not. Because if you already are the owner of a home in Italy, you cannot access this type of incentive.
Okay, this is very interesting, because we know there are a lot of American or people living overseas which has Italian heritage, or Italian dual citizenship. So it is very interesting for a lot of people. So what we said is, if you buy from private owner as a primary home, it's about 2% on the cadastral value. If you buy as a second home, the property as a second home, you pay 9% of the cadastral value.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I want just to complete, because there is an exception, obviously, if it is a nice, beautiful, villa in the countryside, since somebody brought it up in the questions. If it is in the countryside, most likely there is also some land. The land comes with a different taxation. Land is subject to 15% taxes, regardless if it is first home, second home, it is 15%.
So that land goes on its own. 15%.
Land goes on its own, yeah. So when you buy a home with some land, usually what people do is they put in the purchase contract, the majority of the value refers to the home, and the smallest portion possible of the price, they refer to the land. So let's say you're buying for 100,000, a property for 100,000, you will say, 95 is for the home, 5,000 is for the land around the home. Obviously, it needs to be consistent and reasonable, so that the transaction does not get audited and you don't get fined, but that's usually the way they go.
And it has to be agreed between the buyer and the seller, of course.
Yes, correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And if you buy a house directly from we covered buying the transaction between private owner and seller.
Yeah.
What if you buy from the builder? So a new home, and
So
you
if
buy
you
it
buy,
directly.
yeah, sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no. Okay.
So when you buy a home from a builder who had just built a property, then there will be VAT, which
Okay.
is a different type of tax, value added tax. In some other countries, they know it better as a sales tax. So when you buy a home from a company, there will be no registration tax. The one we referred to before, the 2 and 9%, is called registration tax. When you buy
Okay.
from a builder, there is no registration tax, not 2%, not 9%. However, there is VAT, sales tax, and that is, in the event of first home, is 4% of the purchase price. And if it
Okay.
is not first
So we're
home,
not referring to the cadastral value anymore. We are referring to the market value,
to the purchase price, to the
to the
purchase price,
purchase
actually.
price, of course.
Yeah, to the purchase price. And if it is not 4%, if you're buying a holiday home, it is 10%. And so already there, not only you have much higher tax rates, because 2 versus 4 for prima casa, for first home, and 9 versus 10 for a holiday home. But also the
Yes.
taxable basis is so much higher, because from being 30 to 40%, you're paying the higher rate on 100% of the purchase price.
Okay.
So
Well,
that is significant. However, everything else about the citizenship incentive also applies in this case. And my recommendation, if you are not, if you have not decided in the early stages of the transaction whether you want to take advantage of the lower tax when you buy from a developer, or if you want to buy a holiday home, my recommendation is to when you do the purchase offer and you have to pay the deposit, just go, first of all, qualify the deposit as a penalty deposit, because that will avoid the need to apply taxes to it. Otherwise, you will have to pay VAT also on the deposit. And secondly, the other thing is, you can always say in the beginning of the transaction that your intention is to establish first home tax incentive, and then by completion you can change your mind and just pay the difference of the VAT without penalties.
okay. That's a good advice, of course. So, as we say, there is a much difference between buying from private and buying from directly from the builder. So let's make sure you understand that, and you make clear if it's from a private or from the builder. And sometimes happens also that the property is owned by a company. And so, which is not the builder, of course, it's a company, it's an SRL or a limited company or whatever it is that owns the property. How does that work with
Sure.
the taxation and everything?
Yeah, we see this especially in nicer homes or sometimes luxurious homes. Many times it happens that who owns these properties owns them through a company, meaning sometimes people, for a number of reasons, for inheritance, tax, civil, so many possible options, instead of buying a home in their own name, they buy a property, an Italian property, in a company. So they establish first the company, and then they buy the property through the company. So, like, let's say you decide incorporate a company, and through the company you buy that property, right? So in that case, it will be the purchase from a company. And so your question was, if you are the buyer after somebody has done the purchase through this scheme. So you, as the buyer, you have two options basically. One option is to buy the property from a company, once again. So more or less the same things that we discussed earlier would apply, with some exceptions. Instead of sales tax, registration tax might apply. But it depends really on the nature of the business that company does. However, without getting too specific, so we don't confuse everyone here, you have either the option to buy just the property and leave that company empty, or you can buy the shares of that company. Because many times, once again, especially for luxurious homes, these companies don't have any other purpose other than holding that property and perhaps running it as a bed and breakfast or something like that. So it is much cheaper to just buy the shares of the company, because there will be no transfer tax on the property, no VAT, nothing. It will be a very a much simpler and cheaper transaction that would cost a fraction of what the transfer of the property purchase will cost, and also would allow you to avoid a number of formalities and requirements. So, for example, compliance regarding the property, energy certificate, and so many other things. And obviously, as a buyer, you still want to do those checks, compliance check and other checks, but they are not going to be an obstacle or to delay the transaction unnecessarily, because you can control it much better. Plus, if you own the shares, you then don't own an Italian property. You own a movable asset, and as such, you can put into your inheritance plan in a different manner than you would be able to do if it was owned by you personally. Does it make sense? Is that clear?
Absolutely. And also, it's also the case with many farms, which is a company because they produce vegetables and everything, and they sell the property with the land and everything, so you can buy through the company. Or another case, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a company as agriturismo, which sometimes, I know it's a restaurant agriturismo, but sometimes the restaurant is already just closed. It stands up the company owning the property, so you might want to buy the company, and then you get also the company, and then you do whatever you want if you keep.
Sure. And let me say something about the agriturismo, since you mentioned it, and I know this because we have worked on some, but also because the first one I worked on was my mom's one. My mother owns an agriturismo, and so
you prove on your skin.
exactly the hard way.
Yeah.
So basically, when you if you want to buy an agriturismo, it is to run an agriturismo has so many tax incentives. However, there are some very, very strict requirements. For example, the owner of the agriturismo needs to be a registered farmer, and needs to be a registered farmer for at least 2 years. So if you are an investor from overseas who wants to buy and run an agriturismo, you either need to have somebody who is registered as a farmer on board somehow on the corporate management or ownership, or otherwise you would need to first get the license as a farmer, which is not really a license, it's more of a registration. And then at that point, you can take advantage of all the tax incentives that
they make this because we have a lot of incentives.
Yes, farm incentives, a ton of farms incentives. Yes. And when you buy as a farmer, when you buy land, instead of 15%, you spend 1% registration tax on land, 1%, because they want to help farmers to buy more land, so they can farm with more efficiency, and also they will buy land instead of selling land to developers to develop more construction.
Of course, since they want to incentives the farmers, you need to be a farmer to get the incentives.
Exactly. Or have a farmer on your
exactly. But anyway, that must be the scope, the proposal.
Yes.
So since we're talking about land, there is a question here. Is there a tax credit if the land has agricultural use? And I add, since we discussed about the 15% taxes on land, does it depend if it's is there any difference if there is an agricultural land or a building plot?
Okay, so absolutely, there is a significant difference. So if you are buying land that is zoned for agriculture purpose only, that means that you cannot build on it, or you can build very, very little on it. And usually
just a shed for your tool.
Yes, or if you have a certain surface, usually it's minimum 4,000 square meters, which will be about 40,000 square feet. you can build something approximately about 80 square meters, which will be 800 square feet. These are type of the parameters. So it would be like a small, very small 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment for almost an hectare, almost an acre, sorry. And if, however, it is a plot of land that is zoned for development, so to build residential units, obviously in a much smaller plot of land, you can build an apartment building. And in that case, the taxation is different. The taxation will be 15% of the market value of the plot of land, and the market value is calculated based actually on comparable transactions that are done locally for similar plots of land with similar specifications. So it is much higher to it's much more expensive to buy a plot of land that is zoned for development. Also, it is more expensive to inherit that type of land, because when you let's say you buy a plot of land that is meant for development, and when you pass, your heirs put it in the declaration of succession to put it in their names. If it is agricultural, they will pay virtually no transfer taxes on that plot of land. And if it is zoned as a development, they will pay at least 3% of the market value of that area. And the tax authorities go after people who don't declare the proper value. We have a ton of experience of these type of situation. People forget to check the zoning. And how do you check the zoning? Some people might ask. Well, you file a request with the comune, and it is mandatory when you're buying a home or a property that has any land, and usually any land, especially any land in excess of 5,000 square meters, the seller has to get a zoning certificate from the commune. And so the zoning certificate will be part of the purchase contract. And so that's how you find out what type of land you're buying.
Okay, that's clear. So we bought our house, either prime home, second home, or from a company, or through a company, whatever, from the builder. So what's the ongoing taxes on ownership of this property?
Okay, so it is absolutely right. When you have paid for transfer taxes, unfortunately, you are not done with paying taxes regarding that property. It's just the start, just the beginning.
You're never done paying taxes.
So, however, so let's dive into it. So when you buy a home in Italy, unless some exceptions apply, you are expected to pay property ownership taxes every year, no matter what. So if the property is zoned as a residential unit, you will have to pay IMU, which is roughly, our rule of thumb is roughly a 1% of the purchase price, very roughly, because it's not that the legal parameter. The legal parameter is almost a 1% of 160 times the cadastral parameter that you have on that property parcel. So, but as an average, if you factor 1%, you will be on you will have a rather accurate estimate of what you might end up paying. Okay, and if you, however, use that property as your primary residency, so not if you have purchased it with the first home incentives, but if you actually use that property as your primary residence, then you will not pay any annual property taxes. No IMU, no IMU. Okay.
Do you have to live in?
So you don't have to live in the property, but you have to be registered at the commune as a registered resident. So let me tell you this, because many people get confused about this concept, because it's a very European concept, the residency registration. it doesn't exist in common law countries like in the US, in the UK. So in Italy, when you live in a place and you have a duty to report yourself to the local authorities of that municipality, say, hey, I'm living here. I am now a resident of this comune, of this town, this village. Then the representative of that village of the commune will put you on a special record of residence, and they will send you the municipal police within 45 days to check that you are actually staying there. And if this procedure ends up successfully, then they will take you off the list of people who have to pay taxes for their home in that village. However, if you don't go through this process, your name will not be registered as a resident at that address, and you will keep paying taxes on annual property taxes on that address. And it is not a retroactive process. You cannot go to the commune and say, hey, I've been living here for a year. Will you waive me the previous taxes? Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You will have to pay taxes up to the date when you went to the commune and filed your application to be registered as a resident.
Okay, that's clear. And is there any other taxes we have to pay, Yvonne?
So yes, the other taxes, when you register as a resident or when you own a property in Italy, you pay garbage tax. Some people call it trash tax, rubbish tax. So in Italy, it is not privately managed tax. The trash service is handled by the municipality. So there is a municipal trash service, and you pay for that service through the municipality. So you usually receive, this is a big difference. And actually, thank you for asking if there was other taxes, because this brings me to this topic. The municipality will send you a trash tax bill to your home address or to the designated address if you have chosen to have an alternative address to receive the bill, the trash bill. However, the municipality will not send you a bill for your annual property taxes. So let's say you are an investor from the UK and you own a property in Italy, and you want to know how much you have to pay. How do you figure it out? So it used to be that each commune, each municipality will send you a tax bill every year, would tell you, well, you are the owner of this property, or you and your spouse are owners of this property. So each of you has to pay this amount, and you will pay it, and that you will be done with it. However, unfortunately, over the past years, they have changed the rules several times, and the commune, the township, couldn't handle it and couldn't keep up with the changes. So they said, you know what? Whoever owns a property has to figure out how much they have to pay and make the payments on their own. So they stopped sending the bills. So how do you do it? Most people will hire an accountant or a lawyer or somebody to calculate the taxes and make the payment with their systems, because it's just confusing otherwise. It's very easy, but if you don't do it every day, it might get confusing to keep up with.
Yeah, so it's better to get help from some professional. Actually, there is a good question here. When are property taxes due? Every 6 months? Once a year? Okay. Is there a term when you have to pay?
Okay, this is a very good question. Yes. So for the IMU, the ownership property taxes, you have several options. The standard option is to pay the taxes twice a year. One is by June 15, and one is by June 16 and December 16. So June 16 is for the first 6 months of the year, and by December 16 is for the second half of the year. However, if you want, you can pay the whole year at once. And many times, especially for small holiday homes, the total amount a year is less than 300 euros. So most people from overseas, they prefer to pay all at once and be done with it. Yes. They make one payment. You can also pay everything in December with the addition of a small interest, very, very small interest on the first payment, the one that you missed in June. And if you missed the deadline, let's say somebody has purchased a home in November, or in December and they didn't know about this. You say, oh man, I wish I knew. What do I do now? Well, there is an option to apply to pay late. It's called tax amnesty. So you basically turn yourself in and say, hey, I was late. Here's my tax payment. And there are some preset penalties which are highly discounted if you pay voluntarily
before they ask you for the money.
Before they ask you for the money. If they ask you for the money, they will apply the highest penalty, not the highest, but much higher penalties and interest. If you realize that you missed the deadline, you usually pay either just the interest, like for December, if you in December pay also June, or if you pay after December, you will pay also very small penalty, especially if it is just a few days or months after the deadline.
Okay, let's cover another aspect about owning a property in Italy, which we know it's a lot of overseas buyers are sensible. Inheritance. So if I buy my property, if I pass away or when I pass away, what does it happen to my property? How does it work in Italy, and what can I do?
Okay. Yeah, sure, definitely. It's a very common question, and usually people ask this question after they have completed the purchase. After all the excitement about the purchase, everything settles a little bit, and they start, oh, but now what do I do? And so it's good to talk perhaps before that happens.
As we say, planning up front is always better.
Absolutely. So there are, I think, two main things that I would like to share with the viewers today. One is that it is possible to put your Italian property into your foreign will if you have a will. Now, we know that by experience, personal and professional, that overseas people make a will much earlier during their life than in Italy. In Italy, people don't make.
We never think about. We think we are. we live forever. So.
Yes, exactly. So probably many of our viewers might already have a will, so they might wonder what would happen to my Italian property. So online, you find a ton of sources where they say, oh, you need to have an Italian will. I recommend against that, actually, because having two wills might create a ton of confusion and conflicts and potential for disputes. Actually, we have a ton of experience of disputes that were generated because of there were two wills. So our recommendation is, since there are rules and regulations to avoid that, you can put your property into your foreign will. And there are several ways to do that. You don't have to have an Italian will. It's just what you want to do is probably make sure to have in your home country will an express mention that you want your home country law, and in particular the law of your citizenship, if you are a Canadian, if you are an Irish person, the law of your citizenship to regulate also the inheritance of the property that is based in Italy. And Italy, because of European regulations and other legislation, will have to comply with that wish and adopt the foreign legislation to determine how to distribute the property, to determine who the heirs are, and all those type of matters. However, this doesn't change taxes. Since we're talking about taxes, the property is in Italy, and even if the owner is not an Italian resident, the Italian taxes will apply, at least will apply first, meaning that when somebody overseas owns a property in Italy and passes away, the Italian government will say, okay, if you want to update the name on the title of that property, you tell me who is the beneficiary. But that beneficiary will have to pay taxes in Italy, inheritance taxes in Italy, which are actually not that bad, especially compared to most other inheritance tax rates around the world. But it is important to know that taxes have to be paid in Italy, regardless the law that you choose to determine who receives the property. Does it make sense? Is that clear so far? Okay, fantastic. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. And so these are the two things I wanted to mention. And just to complete this, and in Italy, as I said, inheritance taxes are very generous or very low, because spouses and children don't pay any inheritance taxes all the way up to 1 million of a share that they will receive. So if there is one spouse and two children, there will be an allowance of 3 million, and plus that allowance, if there is a property, will be calculated using the cadastral value. So
okay.
you really, yeah, unless you have
So,
an incredibly huge mansion, you will not pay inheritance taxes, but you will pay inheritance transfer taxes, because there is inheritance tax and there is inheritance transfer tax, and transfer tax
right.
is 3% of the cadastral value, unless you are going to use the property as your primary residency. In that case, it will be just 400 euros.
Okay, so if it's gonna be your primary home, just 400 euros. It doesn't matter how much it is the value or
Correct. Yeah, or if you are an Italian citizen living overseas, you also can take advantage of that if you don't have any other homes in Italy. So,
okay.
yeah.
Can you tell me quickly how does I mean, if you don't do anything, if you don't do any will, and how does it work in Italy? So if I pass away, my house, who does it go to?
Okay. So that is
without doing anything.
okay. So if you don't make a will, or if you have a will where you do not specify that you want your home country law to apply, at that point, because of a number of rules, once again, international rules, most likely Italian law will apply to that. It is very likely the Italian law might apply to the distribution of the property. And so if Italian law applies, especially if the deceased is not a European resident, if the Italian law apply, then there are specific rules that establish who gets the property. So if there is no will, spouse and children will get the property. If there are no children, there's just spouse and the siblings will get the property. If there is no spouse, only children, the children will get all the property. If there is a will, we need to remember that if there is no choice of foreign law, or if no foreign law applies, in Italy there is forced heirship. Forced heirship is a system of law meant to protect certain family members, and in particular, parents, spouse, children, grandchildren. And so if Italian law applies and you have a will that is in conflict with forced heirship, that will may be challenged. And people who are protected by forced heirship might claim their share as provided and established by forced heirship. So that might create a conflict, that might create a dispute. So that's why our recommendation is to make an express reference in the foreign will that you want the foreign law to apply, because that will eliminate the risk of Italian forced heirship rules to apply.
Yeah, that's absolutely makes sense. There is a question: does it make sense to purchase Italian property in my name and children's name to avoid inheritance tax on a property?
That's a very good question. Yes and no. Meaning, it depends how old you are, and it depends how old your children are. If your children are under 18, it would be it would be probably more expensive to buy the property in your children's name, putting your children on the deed, because you would need an Italian judge, and probably a judge from the place where you live, to give a sign off on the purchase, to give authorization to put the property in the name of a minor. You would have to present a deal and explain that it is also in their interest, and eventually you can do it. And when you decide to sell the property, you will need the court authorization also to sell the property, because to protect minors, any of these type of significant transactions needs to be reviewed by court. So it might be aggravating your freedom of disposing of that asset. Also, if you're buying a property that is not significantly, of significant value, as we have seen taxes between parents and children are very nominal. We're talking 3% right now of the cadastral value. So it's not that significant at all. I don't know if making the title, sharing the title with your children, and the implication and aggravation that would carry and the cost it would imply would justify, would be justified under the small, option of the 3% saving. Plus, another thing, that if you are instead an older person, let's say if you are in your 60s and your kids are in their 30s, so what you could do is you buy the property with your children. That will definitely make sense. Buy the property with your children, but in your name. Don't buy it with equal rights. Put everything into your name as life interest only, and everything in your children's name as bare interest, meaning nuda proprietà in Italian, bare interest. So your children basically just have the title in their name, whereas you have life interest, meaning the right to use the property, rent the property, collect rent, and when you pass, that interest will just expire and your children will become owners without that property going into your estate at all. So no transfer taxes whatsoever. However, if you at a certain point decide to sell your home, your property, you will need your children's signature.
Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely a good advice. So let's move to another topic. It's restoration bonuses. We know that there are a lot of bonuses in Italy about restoration, especially during this pandemic situation. The Italian government made new benefits on restorations. Do they apply also to overseas buyer, and how can they apply to people coming from overseas?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There have been a ton of discussions, and initially there was confusion about the fact that it could apply or not, if it would apply or not to foreigners and people who live overseas. However, there have been official rulings from the Italian tax authority confirming that even foreigners, people who don't live in Italy and people who don't have Italian income, except for the actual property ownership, can take advantage of the recently enhanced and recently established tax credit or tax incentives that were passed because of COVID in large part. What I'm referring to in particular, and I think you too, is the 110%
yes.
so-called super bonus, but also what the Italian government did last year. They improved some tax credit programs that already existed. So the 110% is pretty hard to qualify for, let's say, because it establishes a number of requirements that need to be met in order to access it. For example, you have to achieve more earthquake stability or safety, or you have to improve energy efficiency significantly, and it needs to be rated, meaning every property in Italy has a specific energy efficiency rate, from A, top efficiency, to G, least efficient. So if you improve it 2 levels, let's say, that would be one of the requirements to access this bonus.
Let's say that it's complicated to get it also because it's called 110%, because if you spend 100,000 euros to restore your house and you meet those parameters, they give you back 110,000 euros for the restoration. That's why it's complicated, because you can restore it, let's say, for free, and you get also 10% more back than what you spent.
Absolutely. The concept is absolutely as you said. However, the threshold is lower than 100,000, meaning they will give you the money, but up to a certain threshold. And depending on the specifics of the work, et cetera, you can get maximum, usually 95,000 any work up to 98,000 will qualify. So very close to 100,000. So you will get something like 108,000, something like that. But yes, definitely, this is extremely advantageous, very advantageous. So they want to make sure that they are giving out money, but also they are improving energy efficiency. So that will will help Italy, the Italian government, meet the parameters established in the Paris Accord for the climate change, to control and limit climate change and so forth. So also for earthquake safety, they're giving out money, but the work that people do would actually make the Italian real estate in general safer for Italy. But the other two I was referring to that have been improved are the 50% and 65%. And basically they apply to almost every type of improvement you want to do on your home. So even if you want to just redo your bathroom, no energy efficiency, nothing, just want to redo your tiles, your shower, and whatever, you can access a 50% tax credit, where the government basically will give you a tax credit for half of what you spend. And if you meet certain energy efficiency requirements, not as stringent as the ones applicable to the 110%, you can access the 65% tax credit. So, but to answer your question, how can a foreigner who doesn't have Italian income use these tax credits? Because tax credit, everyone knows, tax credit by definition is a credit against taxes. So
you have to pay taxes to have credits.
Yeah, exactly. If you live overseas, you don't pay taxes in Italy. How do you satisfy that? How do you use that credit? Against what? Obviously, you cannot take it to your home country, to your home revenue tax office and say, hey, I have this Italian tax credit. They will probably laugh in your face and say, what do we do with it? So Italy has established a new program based on which what you can do with that tax credit is to give it back to your contractor. So you can tell your contractor, your builder, listen, for this job, we have agreed 20,000 euros. I am entitled to 10,000 euros tax credit. Is it okay if I give you 10,000 euros cash and 10,000 in tax credit instead of giving you 20,000 cash? And many builders will say yes. So you end up paying half of the cost. And the reason for that, the reason why that is possible is because the government has established an option for you to give the tax credit to somebody else. And you can give it to your builder, you can give it to the post office financial department, and you can give it to any Italian bank or insurance company. So now, if you give it to the contractor or any of these other institutions, sometimes, the other institution, bank and insurance for sure, contractors most often will ask you for a commission. So if you give them 10,000 tax credit, usually the post office, bank, or insurance company will give you a credit for 8,000, let's say. They will keep 2,000, like 20% for their paperwork to process with the government, the refund and the credit. But if you do it with a contractor, sometimes contractors might be happy to get that credit, because at the end of the day, you will not negotiate as hard the job, the work to be done. So the contractor will get full listing cost on their job, and they will accept your tax credit without applying any commission. However, in my experience, most contractors will ask for 20 to 25 commission on any tax credit transferred back.
Okay. We finished the subject and the topic and the live stream, so we can go through a few of the lots of questions that arrived. So I can put some, since we were talking about renovation and bonuses, there is these questions, and while you reply, I let go a banner with your credential, the link of your website, since people are asking how they can contact you. So this question is, if I renovate a house with super bonus, can a house extension also be covered under super bonus?
Yes, definitely. You can, depending on the type of work you do, rulings came out, and it is possible also to apply the super bonus to the extension. Obviously, all the requirements need to be met, and there's also to say that the government is discussing, as promised, as committed to extend the super bonus deadline, because right now everything is meant to, or is supposed to, expire by the end of this year in terms of applications and most of these type of programs. However, the government has committed to extend the programs. Also, it is important to know that many times when they have extended programs, they have tweaked them a little bit. They have applied some changes. And so we will have to wait and see what the changes will be, if any, when they will come out with the rules for the extensions, which are expected in the next few weeks before the end of the year.
Okay. Another question is, are there any extra taxes or costs when buying historically important home, buying apartment in Palazzo, Monastery, etc.? There is some zoning about luxury properties.
Yeah,
Why
so
you afraid that? Can you also explain what's different in luxury home, what it meant for the cadastral office, luxury home?
yeah, exactly. Luxury is not an objective reference, right, or an objective objective. For you, something might be luxury that is not luxurious for me. So in Italy, the tax office has determined now. Actually, Italian government has established certain parameters according to which you can objectively know if a property qualify as a luxurious property for tax purposes. And in particular, so this is something very important when you look for a home on Gate-Away.com, for example. When you engage with an agent or with a seller, you need to ask, what is the zoning category of this property? And they will say it is either A1, A2, A3, all the way to A9. If it is A10, it means that it is an office. It's not really a home. It's an apartment, but it's actually zoned for business purposes. If this from A1 to A9, then yes, it is a home. But if it is, a residential unit. But if it is A1, A8, or A9, it means that it is a luxurious home, and and it might be either a nice A1 is for, if I remember correctly, like each of them, I don't remember now exactly which one is which, but one is castles and historic properties. The other one is for luxurious villas, and the other one is for palaces. And so if the property is zoned as such, A1, A8, and A10, then you cannot buy it as a first home. You can only buy it as a holiday home. Even if you will go live there, you will still have to pay property taxes every year, and you will pay 9% of the cadastral value, the value in record. There is no tax incentive. So that is the main difference.
Okay, that was actually very clear. Of course, the A1 to A9, so meant that for the cadastral value is luxury. It doesn't mean that it is historically. I mean, an historical home and everything can also be not a luxury house, or a luxury house can be a very low price house, because it depends on the cadastral value. Is that correct? I mean, if I buy a monastery, it doesn't mean it has to be a luxury house. It can also cost me 10 million euros, but still not being in the cadastral zone between.
Yeah, absolutely.
And vice versa. You can buy 100,000 euros house, which unfortunately it is in that zone in the cadastral value you have to pay as a luxury home.
Yes, definitely, absolutely. It is absolutely possible, and the cadastral value, it is independent from the category. However, usually homes that are A1, a 9, or 8, or a 9 are usually have very high cadastral value.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Nick, we already run out of time because it's 1 hour and 10 minutes. It was very, very interesting. And of course, you people can keep writing, asking questions on the post on this live stream. I'm sure Nick and his colleagues can answer all your questions, and you can keep going through all the questions and answers. So thank you very much, Nick. It was a real pleasure for being with us, and thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to us. And we hope that it was interesting. Bye.
Thank you very much, Simone. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.